The Octragona domain, a dank tropical forest whose gigantic trees towered hundreds of feet. Giant palms shaded glassy pools, dark green, where huge pale lilies floated, poisoning the air with their strong, sweet, sickening odor. In this moist, slumberous richness, heavy with unhealthy vapors, flowers of marvelous beauty and strange unknown fruits, berries grew in abundance. Sheldon, who was fond of strawberries, gathered a quantity of deep red, luscious appearing fruit, but Zax warned him against eating them, declaring the berries too large, that strawberries of great size always tasted like turnips. These berries were stringy and juiceless, with a peculiar sharp flavor that blistered the palate. Fortunately, we refused the first mouthful, the fruit was poisonous. But we indulged freely in rich purple clusters of wild grapes, with a deep wine flavor, and thoroughly satisfied our curiosity regarding all fruit discovered in our wanderings. For nearly a week we roamed in the enchanting Octragona forest, but so nary an Octragona. We strayed far from the river bank, lost our way, and in the confusion trying to find it, plunged deeper into the wondrous tropical maze. The forest was alive with animal and bird mysteries. For hours we followed strange uncouth tracks, made by some monster. Occasionally the wood rang with shrill bell-like notes, followed by groaning, moaning sounds that chilled us. The roaring of distant lions was cheerful in comparison, but forced us to realize our peril. Monstrous birds of gay plumage chirped to us, but flew higher in the trees as we approached. Great red and gold serpents coiled and twisted, but glided to higher branches as we stopped to watch them, where they regarded us curiously from their brilliant unblinking eyes. Once we came near being trampled under by a strange wild herd of ponies. They clattered past, snorting and neighing, and glared viciously at us. They were queer, shaggy little ponies with monstrous heads. Frequently, as dusk approached, we were startled by wild, uncanny hoots, and saw huge, elongated bodies whir from tree to tree. We came across one of these creatures lying prone upon the ground, its immense gauze wings spread wide in the sun. Believing it dead, we poked and prodded the body, which was covered with a pale brown down. Zax, very curious, attempted to turn the thing on its back. Suddenly the wings fluttered, the mouth opened wide, and out forked pointed red fangs. With a loud sibilant sound it flew up in the tree. We watched it as it gently settled among the branches. "Queer thing, neither animal nor fowl," mused Sheldon. "It's animal," Zax informed us in authoritative yet argumentative tones. "It's the winged lizard, which has become extinct on our side." Sheldon coughed doubtfully. "Flying lizard, ahem." We encountered a colony of gigantic apes dwelling in little huts made of foliage and tree branches. The tiny village rested in a wide enclosure. Our approach created great excitement. The apes trooped from their huts and clustered around us. They seemed friendly, but one huge fellow familiarly grasped Sax's shoulder. The next instant he sprawled upon the ground. Then they showed fight, but we routed them. They rushed up the trees, shrieking and chattering, and began pelting us with leaden fruit. We stampeded. Sheldon and Saunders speeded and left us to haul the car. When we caught up with them, they were learnedly wrangling over Darwin. "Wrong, boys, altogether wrong," Zax solemnly informed them. "We've committed a grave blunder. Those were the Octrogonas, and we've insulted them." Zax joined the Darwin debate. The clear, sparkling stream, which Saunders vowed was the river of life, proved as elusive, but we did not despair. The luxurious forest was way ahead of the ice blockade, and feeling confident that ultimately we would be discovered by either the Octrogonas or Centaurians, we leisurely and cheerfully penetrated deeper into the dense, mystic wood, under the impression, we could discover a new route and unexpectedly stumbled across, not the long-searched-for river, but the Octrogonus, who seemed astounded at seeing us. They closed around us at once. Warriors, magnificent men, clad for war in steel-like armor, light as wool. They were a detachment of the Octrogona army guarding the frontier. We told them where we came from, had been discovered by the Potolilis, and had strayed from the river bank. Judging from their astonishment, it was the first they'd heard of us, but they treated us with the greatest courtesy, the captain explaining that his regiment had been camped in the woods for weeks. They received little news, but were aware that warring tribes had met in several engagements, and with a whoop informed us the Octrogonus had been victorious in all. What the war was over they neglected to state. They questioned us closely concerning the Potolilis and seemed disappointed because we could give no information. They finally escorted us to the edge of the woods, pointed out the route, and there, far in the distance, sparkling, dancing in its serpentine course, was the river whose bank we were still to follow. The directions were clearly given, but at the last the captain thought it advisable to send a couple of guards with us. We thanked him and departed jubilant, glad to be rid of the strange, dense forest, which to us seemed to extend over the whole of this half of the world. We travelled in an open, rugged country, meeting numerous detachments, small armies bound for some place where the enemy had been located and hoping for battle. The troops halted at sight of us. We were detained and gaped at while the guards explained who we were and where we came from. Toward evening we reached the main camp of the Octrogona army, a soft green plain dotted with a formidable array of tents pitched closely together, row upon row. The Octrogona army numbered thousands. Evidently we were expected. Pickets lowered arms as we passed, and the news flew of our arrival. Warriors trooped from their quarters to gaze wonderingly at us and our strange little car, and reverently helmets were raised in salute. Then suddenly the air rang with cheers. We uncovered, shouting response. The soldiers crowded about us in welcome. We were detained a few minutes, then hustled into the car, and dozens of willing hands pulled us along at a lively speed. Accompanied by cheering hundreds, we halted before a wide, square tent staked in the center of the camp, and were escorted to a cool, fragrant room fitted up with barbaric splendor. A hanging of skin was flung aside, and a man advanced to meet us. We knew at once this was Octrogona. He was darkly handsome, magnificent physique, his magnetism invincible. He was born to rule. With piercing glance he scanned our faces. Then, like a mask, the sternness vanished. His smile was as sweetly alluring as a woman's. "Greetings, greetings," he cried, clasping Saxe's hand. We clustered about him, and each in turn received the embrace of welcome. He motioned us to seats, then explained he had been commissioned by the Centaurians to discover the cause of the phenomenal northern lights, but Potolili, with whom he was at war, his face darkened ominously, had spies, vermin crawling throughout the Octrogona forces, who conveyed to their chief the news of the Northern Commission, and so on. Potolili at once organized and headed an expedition and was well on his way north before the Octrogonus had commenced preparations. "To the Potolilis," he continued, "is the credit, reward of discovery, but it is an honor stolen, and for the theft they shall pay. I have vowed this war shall end only with the extermination of the Potolilis. The black tribes must dissolve in one. The enemy does not progress. They are now, as centuries ago, savages. They are guilty of innumerable outrages against us. From our stock they pick the best, and for years have appropriated our women and boasted of their gallantry because the women failed to return. They dared not. They have in every way sought to injure our good repute with the Centaurians, and Potolili's latest offense is the seizure of my sister. He forcibly removed her and her women from the retreat I had placed her in. She was the most beautiful woman of the Octrogona tribe, but the moment she became Potolili's possession, she became an outcast. She hastens his downfall. I didn't dare look at Sheldon. I say, boys, he muttered, what a jolly opinion they have of each other, and what holy liars! 5-1 on crafty Potolili against this fiery young scamp. We didn't take his bet, but it went hard to keep from grinning. His language was so droll beside Octrogona's lofty tirade, whose eyes now snapped as he realized, for some reason, we were laughing at him. Zax hastened to express sympathy and declared we all hoped the Octrogona forces would be victorious. Octrogona saluted deeply, at the same time keeping a suspicious eye on Sheldon, which caused Saunders to irritably remark that Sheldon was an ass whose noisy braying would eventually get us all into trouble. Potolili's agility in discovering us evidently greatly exasperated Octrogona. He will be rewarded with a piece of land we've both coveted for over 50 years, he hissed. But I'll wrest it from him. Do you know, the moment he sighted you, a messenger was sent over the mountains to report to the Centaurians, who will arrive shortly to escort you to their territory. If we were at peace, Potolili would have forced you people over the mountains to prevent our meeting. But the journey is dangerous during wartime. He suffered heavy losses during his northern trip. My troops slaughtered the Potolilis in every engagement. I had troops stationed in ambush to capture Potolili when he neared the reservation, never believing he would abandon his discovery 3 miles from the boundary line. He is a coward, sneak, and up to his old deviltry. He will not fight openly like a soldier, but it is destiny. The Octrogonas will be victorious. And, gentlemen, he bowed deeply, my abode is at your disposal. We thanked him, mentioning the car, preferring not to intrude upon him. Impatiently he threw up his hand, commanding silence, then conducted us to an adjoining tent and advised us to cleanse, while attendants hauled in several huge jars containing ice water. I suppose he thinks we bathed every day in an ice lake while fooling around the pole, grumbled Sheldon, dousing himself in the chilling water. He certainly had some good reason for forcing us to clean up in water at freezing point, Zax admitted. Let's ask him for it. Ask him for what? Sputtered Saunders. Something to eat, murmured Zax sweetly, and Saunders glared because we all snickered. Octrogona's quarters consisted of a number of tents, pitched closely together in a circle, and when we ventured forth, we promptly became entangled in the tent maze, butting into places where we had no business to, and startling a number of dusk individuals, who rushed upon us, chattering wildly, but promptly salaamed as though we were gods, and they were black. Phew! Octrogona suddenly appeared, laughing loudly at our discomfiture. We murmured apologies, which he politely waved aside, and escorted us to the front tent. Refreshments were served. The table was loaded with strange delicacies: roasted fish stuffed with berries swimming in the fresh juice of grapes, wild game sliced with crushed nuts, and meat spiced with rich tropical fruit tempted the appetite, yet everything was cold, and Zax longed for soup. The wine was the same brand Potolili had been so lavish with, and, though of a clear sparkling crystal, was searching. Octrogona, in his dining, was civilized, a bon vivant. The service was excellent, putting us on our mettle, and rousing to action our rusty table etiquette. After dining, Octrogona expressed a wish to examine the car. We placed it at his disposal. He examined everything with much curiosity, and for an old string of wax pearls, presented Zax with an armlet carved from quartz, ornamented with 5 flashing emeralds. You're trading at a bargain, old boy, Sheldon told him, but he was frowned to silence, and found solace brewing his coffee, which he wanted Octrogona to taste. Octrogona seemed doubtful of the cup handed to him, but inhaling the aroma, drank with relish. The flavour tickled his palate, and he begged for some of the beans. We decided the cultivation of coffee had become a lost industry. It seemed impossible these enlightened people had never discovered it. We returned to the tent and were served with syrupy liquor in large silver thimbles, and some queer little cakes that tasted like sweetened mud. We avoided the cakes, but the liquor, what a bouquet! And how it flushed us! Even Octrogona, who no doubt was seasoned, seemed affected. His eyes flashed, his lips thickened voluptuously, and his tongue loosened confidentially. With a sigh he told us of Potalily's daughter, which originally was not his intention. "The most beautiful woman in the world!" he exclaimed with amorous enthusiasm. "The women of Centauri are divine, but Potalily's daughter is heaven." "She is your prisoner," I blurted out before Zax could prevent. Octrogona eyed me keenly for a second, then replied, "No, I am her prisoner, her slave." Got it bad," murmured Sheldon, ever alert to mix things. "As you know of Potalily's daughter," Octrogona continued, eyeing me severely, "and undoubtedly believe she is my prisoner, which is false, perhaps you can give me some information concerning my sister Gona." "I cannot," I replied. "Potalily did not mention your sister, though he told of the abduction of his daughter." "That man is a traitor, liar!" Octrogona yelled fiercely. "He abducted Gona, then, learning we were preparing for war, he sends his daughter, whose beauty is renowned, sends this lovely girl among my men, to lead their thoughts from war to love. She obtained sympathy for her father and his people. She lowered my sister in the esteem of my soldiers, declaring Gona went voluntarily, having long been enamored with Potalily. This we did not doubt. By the merest chance I heard of the matter, and ordered the lovely devil brought before me, and she came like the queen, enchantress that she is, reclining amid silken cushions and flowers, and borne aloft by worshippers. I was dazzled, and Octrogona paused. His glance shifted. "She is still here." Then, realizing the comical side of the situation, he burst out laughing. "She and her father are schemers, and have no equal for craftiness," he continued. "Her mission is to influence all in favor of her people, to arouse so-called brotherly love, and effect the unification of tribes, with Potalily as supreme chief. Until her mission is accomplished, she will not permit me to possess her, yet swears to her love for me. She is not a prisoner, but I have placed her where she can work no further mischief except upon me. And I love her, I love her. She has full freedom, but at the least sign of inclination to return to her people, she becomes a prisoner and a slave to my fancy." "Octrogona! Octrogona!" we heard a voice wail in protest, sweet as a bell. With a stride, Octrogona reached the end of the tent, flung aside the hanging, and drew forth the shrinking woman. We knew she was Potalily's daughter. No one in the world could resemble him so completely. She was beautiful, wondrously beautiful, in a sensuous, barbaric fashion. Her luxurious tresses, glossily rippled, unconfined. Her dusky neck, shoulders, arms, were devoid of covering, except for the flashing gems that hid most of her charms. Soft, white, shimmering stuff wound around her form. This woman, with her great animal magnetism, could sway and rule as she pleased. The conquest of Octrogona was diversion to her. She hung upon his shoulder with her full weight. He flung his arm around her. Both were oblivious of our presence. In silence he gazed into her deep eyes with intense love, and she cooed to him while one pretty hand caressed his cheek. "Octrogona, I am your prisoner," we heard her tell him. "Your eyes thrill. Hold me. Your glance is stronger than prison bars." "I should say so," muttered Sheldon, who had become very restless. "I love you, I love you," the siren went on. "Octrogona, your pleasure is mine." Swiftly he bent his head and pressed his lips to hers. "No," said Sheldon, turning his back upon them, "they're not married yet. Matrimony is death to that sort of thing. And I say, boys, she's playing the same old game on him, and they claim to be 600 years ahead of us. That fiery boy is as blind as a bat. 20 to 1, Foxy Potterlily rules the two tribes in less than a month, and I don't blame Octrogona. She's a glorious woman, Jove, A glorious woman! Before we could put a quietus on Sheldon, several men rushed excitedly into the tent. "The Centaurians!" they cried. "The Centaurians are coming!" Octragona awoke as from a dream, becoming at once cold, alert, diplomatic. He gently put the girl from him, and with a deep bow urged her to retire. With a lingering glance she stepped from view. He turned quickly to us, murmuring, "The Centaurs," and he hurried outside. The camp twinkled brightly with lights. We could see the soldiers crowding from their quarters to gaze up at a dozen or more great balls of fire, which were circling and lowering like buzzards. A chariot drawn by 3 magnificent horses dashed up to where we stood. Octragona explained the Centaurians would meet us in the plains a half-mile distant, and invited us to enter the chariot. We declined, expressing the wish to travel in our car. It had brought us so far, it could convey us to the Centaurians. Octragona displayed wisdom. He avoided argument and hurriedly entered the car with us, ordering it to be attached to the chariot, and away we started amid wild cheers from the soldiers. Many followed some distance, shouting lustily, and in the enthusiasm we whooped and jumped like a brace of Indians. Octragona laughed till his sides ached. But at last we were to meet the Centaurians and witness civilization 600 years in advance of our own. We wondered what these new people were like, and gravely pondered between conflicting thoughts of hope and fear. Sheldon believed his great body of fresh water a discovered fact. The Centaurians would escort him to view these marvelous waters. Saunders, jubilant, chuckled with enthusiasm as he speculated upon the vast improvements accomplished in 600 years upon astronomical instruments, which he expected placed at his disposal for a thorough analytic inspection of the planet Virgilius, and he confidentially informed me it was his intention to join the next expedition to the moon. Sachs thought of the lost propylaea, and figured on the powerful proportions it must have attained in so many centuries of improvements. As for myself, I grew wild, restless with expectation. I thought of the wraith devil woman, what you will, that had decoyed me to this world. The luring, smiling beauty frenzied me. Centauri, Centauri was the name my heart gave her. Swiftly we reached the plains, plunging into brilliant illumination cast by great searchlights in the towers of a number of ships. We pressed forward in amazement. "Powers above! They're ships!" Sheldon cried. "Ferry boats!" I gasped. And the decks were crowded. The boats presented a gala appearance, streamers and banners flying, the upper decks shaded with gay-colored awnings. We could easily see into the brilliantly lighted salons, and wondered at the sparkling interior, and down the sides of all these vessels people jostled and hurried. A number of men hastened to meet us, stalwart, massive fellows, white but a dark tinge, and every blessed mother's son of them as handsome as Apollo. Potter Lily spoke the truth. The Centaurians were gods. "Good heavens, what magnificent people!" I cried out in admiration. "Aye," answered Sheldon, "to see something like this is worth crossing the Pole. For the first time in my life I see a man." His remark irritated Sachs. "Curtail your tongues," he snapped. "The more perfect the body, the less soul it contains. Sheldon, you've lost your senses. Undoubtedly those splendid creatures are men. So are we. Perfection we cannot boast, but we possess souls." "Do we now?" squeaked Saunders, who never permitted anyone to worry Sheldon except himself, but Sachs only scowled, and with Octragona stepped from the car. "Wonder if the climate is affecting old Sachs?" Saunders inquired. "You started it," Sheldon growled. "And you got the blame for it," I retorted. "Hist, don't quarrel. Come along," Saunders urged hurriedly. "Suppose they expect to rope us on to those boats." We hurried after Sachs, who spruced up lively as the Centaurian advanced to greet us. A handsome, broad-shouldered gentleman, who spoke words of welcome in Latin, pure and simple, much to the astonishment of Sachs, who expected a mutilation of every language under the sun thrown into one. Many crowded around us, eager to shake hands, and we were extravagantly complimented upon accomplishing the remarkably daring exploit of crossing the polar regions. Of course, Sachs received most of the honors, and bowed continually, while we stood in the rear, a sort of reflection. Though I noticed many eyeing me curiously, and suddenly a group of gay young men, who had held aloof, laughing and joking among themselves, no doubt at me, rushed forward and closed around me, and to my chagrin boldly criticised my face and form, muttering, "A centauri, a centauri." "Now don't get conceited, Sally," Sheldon admonished. "These fellows think you as pretty as you think them." And sizing up the fresh boys, I realized I was as broad, massive, if not quite as tall as they. Sheldon's remark made me blush like a girl, the color flamed my face, and perceiving it, the Centaurians shouted with glee. One slapped me on the back, another patted my cheek, a third pulled me one way, while a fourth drew me in the opposite direction. I caught the nearest man, raised him above my head, swung him around several times, then flung him from me. Another rushed upon me, and, to show my strength, I caught him with one arm, tossed him high as though he were a ball, dizzied him with a rapid swing, then laid him gently on his back. It was enough. "A centauri! A centauri!" they shouted, crowding closer. Then, amid laughter and cheers, I was hoisted and carried in triumph aboard one of the ships. What a predicament had I been less strong! Such a glory, this muscular popularity! Sachs, Sheldon, and Saunders laughingly followed and cheered with the crowd. They were proud of their Sally? Well! Our staunch little car created considerable anxiety, but finally, with the utmost care and reverence, was hoisted aboard. Octrogona accompanied us to the ship simply to go through the formality of explaining that we would meet again. He gave a long handclasp to Sachs, to whom apparently he'd taken a great fancy, while that gentleman advised him that peace is the spirit of civilization, and begged him cease the continual warfare with Potolili. "Become friends, comrades," continued Sachs, warming up. "Yield to the pleading of the girl you love, or you may lose her. She will return to her people." "Oh, no," Octrogona answered quickly. "I love her youth, beauty, but passion does not control me. I delight in anticipation. The girl is mine, and she will never return to her people." "This savage delights in anticipation," murmured Sheldon, "and those on our side delight in precipitation. Wow!" "Have you ever met Potolili?" Sachs asked. "No," cried Octrogona aghast. "Meet Potolili! Oh, no!" "You should," Sachs urged, undaunted. "You love the daughter, you will be charmed with the father. Just give the word, he will meet you more than half." "Ah, no doubt, no doubt," said Octrogona dryly. "But," politely, wishing to make Sachs happy, "I shall consider your advice. It never occurred to me to meet Potolili, but it could be arranged, and to please the girl I am willing to make some concessions. Then, my sister Gona is still his captive." Sachs was pleased and satisfied his words would go a long way toward ending the war. He patted Octrogona on the back, who seemed immensely tickled about something. Sachs smiled indulgently. He considered this great chief merely a hot-headed boy, and renewed the risky topic, endeavouring to impress Octrogona with the wisdom of meeting his enemy. But Octrogona was too politic to continue the subject, and seemed suddenly very anxious to depart. He astonished Sachs by tenderly embracing him, then, bowing deeply to us, hurriedly left the ship. We saw him enter the chariot. He waved his hand as the horses plunged into gallop. End of section 10.